You're spending every weekend maintaining your garden, fighting the same battles month after month, watching your beds underperform no matter how much you water, weed, and fertilize. But what if I told you your grandma knew 15 forgotten secrets that could cut your garden work by 70% while tripling your harvest? Not someday, not next season, this season. The difference between a garden that drains your time and one that gives it back is very simple. And the real secret lies in designing relationships, not managing isolated plants. Successful gardens aren't about products. They're about systems. Here's what most people miss, and this is where it gets interesting. Your garden isn't failing because you lack skill. It's failing because you're running a monoculture system that creates dependencies, isolates problems, and guarantees you'll spend every weekend managing crises. You plant one crop per bed. You separate everything. You treat each plant like an island. Then you wonder why pests show up, why soil depletes, why you're constantly buying solutions to problems that keep coming back. Think about it. You're gardening backwards. Meanwhile, indigenous growing systems thrived for centuries without fertilizers, pesticides, or garden centers. They didn't fight nature. They observed it. They designed polycultures where plants worked together, solved each other's problems, fed the soil, confused pests, and built fertility season after season without purchased inputs. Your grandma planted companions. You're managing isolated failures. But here's the reality. A monoculture tomato bed is a pest magnet, a nutrient drain, and a daily watering burden. Plant that same tomato with basil, marigolds, and a nitrogen-fixing legume, and you've built a self-regulating micro-ecosystem. The basil repels aphids and hornworms through volatile oils. The marigolds confuse root pests and release compounds toxic to nematodes. The legume fixes atmospheric nitrogen and feeds it back into the soil. You stop spraying. You stop fertilizing. The plants handle the work. This is secret number one, and it eliminates 3 problem categories in one move. The most famous example is the 3 sisters: corn, beans, and squash planted together. This isn't folklore. It's functional ecology that worked for thousands of years. The corn grows tall and becomes a living trellis for the beans. The beans fix nitrogen through root nodules, feeding the corn and squash for free. The squash sprawls as living mulch, shading out weeds, retaining moisture, and confusing pests with its prickly leaves. 3 plants, 3 functions, 0 fertilizer, minimal weeding, lower water needs. You're not buying solutions, you're designing them into the system. Now apply that logic everywhere. Tomatoes and basil aren't companions because they taste good together. Basil releases oils that repel aphids, whiteflies, and tomato hornworms. Plant them together and you stop spraying. Marigolds emit scent that disrupts pest navigation. Their roots poison nematodes. Plant them around your beds and pest pressure drops without chemicals. Nasturtiums act as trap crops, luring aphids away from your main plants. Put them at the edge. Let the aphids swarm the nasturtium. Your tomatoes stay clean. You're not fighting pests. You're redirecting them. But here's what the garden center won't tell you. Heavy feeders like tomatoes, corn, and brassicas pull nitrogen from soil fast. You're buying fertilizer to replace it, spending money every season on bags of synthetic nitrogen. Meanwhile, if you plant those heavy feeders next to or in rotation with legumes like beans, peas, clover, or vetch, the legumes fix nitrogen from the air and deposit it directly into the soil through their roots. The tomatoes feed on what the beans provide, free fertilizer, built into your design. Your grandma planted beans between corn rows. You're buying nitrogen in bags and wondering why your budget disappears. Here's the contrast that should make you angry. You're managing a garden where every plant is a separate project with separate fertilizing schedules, separate pest control, separate watering needs. You're troubleshooting isolated failures every weekend. Your grandma planted companions and polycultures where plants solved each other's problems automatically. She didn't manage crises. She designed once and let the system regulate itself while she rested. The mechanism is simple but powerful. Companion planting and polycultures leverage plant chemistry, root relationships, and spatial diversity to eliminate problems before they appear. Pest confusion happens when you mix scents and textures so insects can't locate target crops. Nutrient cycling happens when nitrogen fixers feed heavy feeders in the same bed. Living mulches happen when low-growing plants shade soil and lock in moisture. Trap cropping happens when you plant a sacrificial species pests prefer over your food crops. These aren't tips. They're design principles your grandma knew and modern gardening buried to sell you products. Pick 3 to 5 companions that work together. Plant them in clusters, not isolated rows. Watch what happens. Fewer pests without spraying. Healthier plants without bagged fertilizer. Less weeding because the ground stays covered. This is the foundation. Gardens aren't collections of isolated plants competing for resources. They're ecosystems where relationships do the work. Design them that way, and the maintenance collapses. Now let's talk about soil and water, because here's the reality. You're working harder than necessary and spending money on problems your design should prevent. You're buying compost by the bag, hauling it to beds, spreading it, and wondering why your soil looks depleted again next season. You're watering daily because your soil dries out fast and plants look stressed by noon. Meanwhile, your grandma built soil fertility in place and watered deeply once a week. She didn't buy inputs from garden centers. She designed a system where plants fed the soil and soil held water without constant intervention. This might shock you, but she knew secrets the composting industry doesn't want you to learn. Secret number 6 is chop and drop, and it's the simplest soil building method you'll ever use. When a plant finishes producing or you trim excess growth, don't bag it and haul it to the curb. Chop it and drop it right where it grew. It becomes mulch. It breaks down in place. It feeds the microbes, worms, and fungi that convert organic matter into nutrients your plants absorb. You're composting exactly where the roots need it. No bin, no turning, no waiting, no hauling finished compost back to beds months later. The fertility builds where you're growing, not in a pile across the yard. Think about it. You're paying for bagged compost that was made from someone else's plant waste. Your grandma dropped her plant waste directly on her beds and got the same result for free. Let nitrogen fixers amplify this process. Plant clover, vetch, or peas as cover crops or ground layers between your main plants. Let them grow. Chop them back before they set seed. Drop the cuttings as mulch right there. They decompose fast because they're high in nitrogen, feeding your soil while covering it and suppressing weeds. You've just eliminated the need for bagged fertilizer and bagged mulch in one move. But here's what most people miss about water, and this is secret number 8. You're watering shallow and often, training roots to stay near the surface where they dry out fast and stay vulnerable to heat stress. Deep watering trains roots to grow down where moisture is stable and temperatures stay cool even in summer. Water less frequently, but soak the soil thoroughly each time. Let the top few inches dry between waterings. The roots chase moisture deeper into the ground. Deeper roots mean drought resistance, heat tolerance, and dramatically less watering over time. You're building resilience into the root system itself instead of creating dependency. Your grandma watered deeply twice a week. You're watering shallow every day and spending twice the time for half the result. Pair deep watering with mulch, and you've created a moisture retention system that works while you sleep. Living mulches like clover or squash, or organic mulches from chop and drop material, shade the soil surface and slow evaporation dramatically. Mulch reduces surface temperature by 20 degrees, keeps moisture locked underground, suppresses weeds by blocking light, and breaks down into fertility season after season. You water less, you weed less, you fertilize less. The system compounds efficiency automatically without your constant attention. Now add passive water capture, secret number 10. Observe where water flows in your yard during rainstorms. If it runs off fast, down slopes or driveways, you're losing free irrigation. Shallow swales or sunken beds capture that runoff and hold it where roots can access it for days after the rain stops. Mulch in those low spots acts like a sponge, absorbing water during storms and releasing it slowly during dry spells between rains. You've turned your yard into a water storage system without pumps, timers, or electric bills. But here's the reality the irrigation industry won't tell you. Microclimates do half the work if you design them in. Tall plants create shade. Shade reduces evaporation for plants growing underneath. Plant heat-sensitive greens like lettuce and spinach under the shade canopy of tomatoes or corn. The greens stay cool through summer heat. The soil stays moist twice as long. You've extended your growing season and cut watering needs without adding infrastructure or technology. Your grandma didn't engineer complex irrigation. She planted tall crops on the south side and tucked shade-loving plants underneath where they thrived naturally. Seed saving is secret number 12, and it breaks your dependency on seed companies. Every time you buy packets, you're paying for genetics that may not suit your soil, your climate, or your specific microclimate conditions. But when you save seeds from your best performing plants, you're selecting for adaptation to your exact growing conditions. Those seeds carry genetics from plants that thrived in your yard despite your soil type, your water availability, your pest pressure. Plant them next season, and they perform even better. Over years, you're developing a landrace adapted perfectly to your site. You stop buying seeds annually. Your plants get stronger, more disease-resistant, more productive generation after generation. Let some of your best plants self-seed. Secret 13. Tomatoes that drop fruit and sprout volunteers in the same spot next spring. Lettuces that bolt, scatter seed, and return without replanting. Herbs like cilantro, dill, and parsley that reseed themselves every year. You're not replanting. The garden replants itself. You're managing a perennial system that returns without effort or expense. Perennials amplify this further. Secret 14. Asparagus, rhubarb, perennial herbs like oregano and thyme, berry bushes and fruit trees produce year after year without replanting. Once established, they need minimal water, almost no fertilization if you mulch them annually, and they return stronger each season for a decade or longer. You plant once and harvest for 10 years. Stop asking what annual you want to grow this spring. Start asking what perennial you can plant once and forget while it produces abundantly. Here's the contrast that should change how you garden forever. You're buying compost, buying fertilizer, hauling materials in and waste out, watering daily, replanting annuals every spring, fighting the same soil depletion and water stress every single season. Your grandma chopped and dropped, watered deep and infrequent, let plants self-seed, grew perennials, and built a system where soil fertility and water retention improved every year without purchased inputs or weekend labor. She wasn't working harder. She designed smarter and let relationships do the work. This means you stop buying compost. You stop fighting weeds under bare soil. You stop replanting the same annuals. You get your weekends back because the garden maintains itself through design, not through your constant intervention. But here's what the garden industry fears most. You don't need a farm to do this. You don't need to rip out your whole yard. Secret number 15 is scalability, and it works in small yards, containers, even under HOA restrictions. Start with one bed. Plant a polyculture with companions. Mulch everything with chop and drop material. Water deep once or twice a week instead of shallow every day. Let one crop self-seed. Add one perennial. Observe what thrives in your specific conditions. Expand slowly based on what works. The system builds on itself without requiring massive upfront investment or total yard renovation. Small yards respond beautifully to vertical polycultures. Grow beans or peas up a trellis with lettuce planted underneath in the shade. Plant tomatoes with basil at the base and let nasturtiums trail at the edges as trap crops. You're stacking functions in tight spaces, using every dimension. HOA restrictions often allow ornamental edibles. Grow strawberries as ground cover. Plant blueberry bushes as ornamental shrubs. Tuck herbs like thyme and oregano between flowers. Hide nitrogen-fixing clover in your lawn. You're building a productive ecosystem that looks decorative to neighbors and rule enforcers. Containers work with the same principles. Plant the three sisters in a large pot, one cornstalk, two bean plants spiraling up it, and one compact squash variety trailing over the edge. Add a tomato container with basil and marigolds. Grow a pollinator pot with self-seeding flowers that attract beneficial insects to your balcony or patio. The companions still work together, even in 5-gallon buckets. Stop asking, "What plant do I want?" That's the question garden centers taught you to ask, so you'd keep buying isolated products. Start asking what plants work together to solve each other's problems. Stop buying solutions to problems your monoculture design created in the first place. Design a system that prevents problems through relationships, and you'll spend a fraction of the money and time. Your grandma spent less on inputs, less time maintaining, and harvested 3 times more food because she understood these 15 secrets. She built relationships between plants and soil, between soil and water. She designed once and let nature do the work while she enjoyed her garden instead of fighting it every weekend. You can do exactly the same starting now. You can keep paying garden centers hundreds of dollars per season and spending every Saturday troubleshooting the same recurring problems. Or you can design a self-regulating garden that gives your time and money back while producing more food. The choice is yours, but the path is clear. Start this weekend. Pick 3 companion plants that work together. Plant them in one bed or one container. Mulch them with any organic material you have. Water deeply once, then wait 3 or 4 days. Observe what happens. Watch your garden begin shifting from a war zone requiring constant intervention to an ecosystem that regulates itself through designed relationships. Share this with someone who's trapped in the garden center cycle, spending every weekend fighting their yard. Help them see the system. Show them there's an exit from the maintenance trap. Stop paying companies to solve problems better design prevents. Stop fighting nature when you can partner with it. Start designing gardens that work while you rest. These 15 secrets aren't hidden because they're complex. They're buried because they're simple, effective, and they break your dependency on products. Your grandma knew them. Indigenous growers proved them for thousands of years. Now you know them too. Plant companions. Build soil in place. Water deep. Let plants self-seed. Grow perennials. Design relationships. The garden